We see the average Japanese salaryman who works all day and has no social life to speak of. He continues his monotonous and draining routine until one day he eventually has a heart attack from how unfulfilling his life truly is. He later opens his eyes to find himself in an old-looking hospital with a woman standing over him. She remarks that he has quite the gentle face for someone who is related to his father, but he is still unable to make sense of what is going on yet. A maid enters the room and offers the woman some tea, which is when he is finally able to get a look at himself in the reflection of the tray she's holding. He has been reincarnated as a baby named Ars Leuven, and by the time 3 years have passed, he has already begun to make the best of his new life here. He has mastered how to read and write the language here, and has also become fairly knowledgeable about this world as well. He was born in the Summerforth Empire, which rules over the Summerforth continent, and since has never seen a map like this before, he concludes that wherever he is now is definitely not Earth. He was fortunate enough to be born into a family of nobility called the Leuvens, and that comes with the perks of having a giant house, maids to look after him, and a personal chef. There is also one other thing he got when he reincarnated, as he discovered that he has an ability that no one else has ever had. He goes into the training room for the guards and asks if he can watch them while they practice. They all like Ars, so they see no reason not to let him watch, although it's a little strange that a 3-year-old is so interested in seeing them fight. As he walks around, he notices one guard who is struggling to use a spear, so he sees this as the perfect opportunity to use his special ability, Appraisal. With this ability, he is able to see all the stats of the guard named Milius, and although his cavalry stat is only at D, he has an archery stat which is at B, so Ars can tell that he would be much better suited to take up the role of an archer. After Milius loses his match, Ars goes up to him and asks if he has ever considered using a bow to fight his battles instead. Milius thinks bows are for cowards who enjoy being safe while they attack, so if you would never be caught using a weapon like that. But Ars insists that he thinks Milius would be a really good archer if he tried it out. He wouldn't normally agree to something like this, but since it's Ars that is asking, he caves and decides to try it out at least once. He's never shot a bow before, so he's not very confident with his chances of hitting the target, but Ars assures him that he'll be fine, so he stands in place and draws his bow to fire. The first shot is a bullseye, and Milius can hardly believe what he just managed to pull off. To make sure it wasn't a fluke, he fires several more shots at the target, and each land in the center, with one even managing to split another arrow. After seeing what Milius can do with a bow, all the other guards tell him he should switch to being an archer like Ars had said because he sucks at using a spear anyway. But they still have questions about how Ars was able to tell that Milius would be talented with a bow. There's not much he can say to explain his ability, so he just calls it instinct rather than explaining that he can see people's stats. He is confident in the accuracy of his ability after testing it out, but for some reason, he is unable to use it on himself. At dinner, Ars was getting ready to eat dinner when his father asked him if he had really discovered Milius's talent for archery. His father is Raven Leuvens, and he has a resting grumpy face, so he always looks a little angry even when he isn't. Ars thinks he is an amazing man since he was able to rise from the level of a farmer to nobility with his martial prowess alone. He is so powerful that he is able to take down 10 men all by himself if he needs to. He tells Ars to hone this instinct for finding other people's talent since he will one day take over as the lord of this land, and when he does, the ability to discern the talents of the people around him will be incredibly valuable. He gives his plate of food to Ars as a kind gesture, telling him that he wants Ars to grow up fast. Ever since that day, Ars has spent a lot of time reading up on the Empire, and that led him to realize that he is gonna be screwed if he doesn't change things soon. The rulers of Summerforth are corrupt, and because of this, the peasants are revolting all over the kingdom. If things go on like this, the Empire may fall, leading to widespread wars, and as the future lord of this place, he will be required to lead his men into battle, but he doesn't have the confidence to say that he could be successful in a war. He decides that he needs to prepare himself for such a disaster by gathering talented people to help him when that day comes. He heads out into the streets of the city and begins using appraisal to scan the people for anyone who has some kind of talent. However, even after searching for a long time and wearing out his eyes in the process, he still hasn't found anyone useful yet. Just then, he sees a kid being kicked out of a store and refused service by an old lady. Everyone sees this happen, but they are all racist as well, so they don't want to bother helping a Malkin. Malkin are people who came to Summerforth from across the sea, and they are usually brought in as slaves, so people think low of them. Ars isn't going to just watch him be ostracized by the people, so he walks up to him and offers a loaf of bread, which he had on hand. The boy is hesitant at first, But he accepts the bread, and Ars then uses appraisal on him, which leads him to discover that Reitz is stacked when it comes to stats. His stats are on par with some of the greatest people in the world, so if he has the opportunity to grow, he will become a force to be reckoned with. After finishing the bread, Reitz thanks Ars once more for his kindness and walks off. But Ars doesn't want to let such a talented person slip away from him, so he follows him until they both end up in a dark alley. Reitz stops him and says it's a bad idea to be following strangers down dark alleys, but Ars cuts him off and asks to make Reitz a retainer. Reitz thinks he's joking, but Ars is being dead serious, so he introduces himself as the son of the Lord and asks once again for Reitz to join him since he can tell that he is a very talented person. Reitz doesn't believe he could be as talented as Ars says he is. Plus, he knows it would cause trouble for his family's image if they took in a Malkin like him. Ars says he'll figure something out, but Reitz declines the offer anyway and begins walking off. As he is leaving, Ars begins chasing after him because he may never come across another person as gifted as Reitz again, so to convince him, he switches tactics and attempts to bribe him with all the delicious food his family's personal chef can make for him. Ars takes him back to his house, and Reitz is surprised to see that he wasn't joking when he said he was the son of the Lord of the land. They head inside, and delicious-looking food is served to Ars. But even the servants here are racist as well, so they only offer Reitz a bowl of beans and tells him that he can't possibly expect to eat decent food when he is a Malkin. They want him to eat his day-old beans and get out of the mansion, but Ars refuses to let such brazen disrespect be thrown at his guest. He makes it clear that Reitz is to be given the same treatment that any other guest would be given, so they all apologize and get him some good food this time. While Reitz is enjoying his meal, Ars asks what he is doing in Summerforth in the first place, so he explains that he was part of a group of mercenaries before, but unfortunately, they were all killed on one of their mission, and since he survived, he has been wandering around aimlessly until he happened to arrive here. That's a touching story, but the butler doesn't care in the slightest and urges Ars to make the filthy Malkin boy leave. Ars tells him that he won't be making Reitz leave anytime soon since he brought him here to have him become his official retainer. The butler thinks that is a preposterous proposal, and there is no way his father would ever give his permission for something like that. And he was right, since once Ars told his father of his plans, he flat out denied the idea on the ground that people like Reitz are simply inferior to the people of Summerforth, so he must be useless. Even his father is racist, so Ars is going to have to pull some strings to get him to accept Reitz as a retainer. He tells him that he can sense great talent in Reitz, the same as he had done with Milia's. However, while Raven trusts his son's ability to identify the talents of people, it is well known among the people of Summerforth that Malkins can never achieve anything good, so there is no way Reitz could have such incredible talent as he says. Ars remains insistent that having Reitz on their side will be indispensable to the future of their domain, so he suggests that Raven gives Reitz a test to confirm the talent he possesses. Raven agrees to test him, and if he passes, he can start out as a soldier. But the test he proposes is a duel which Reitz must win if he wants to be approved. Ars is worried since even though Reitz is indeed gifted, his father still has a higher prowess score than him, so he won't be able to win a fair fight. Fortunately, Raven is still a decent man, so he's not going to have a serious fight against a 14-year-old. He'll give Reitz a handicap to make things a little more fair to him, and under these conditions, Ars thinks Reitz has a good chance of coming out victorious. Reitz has no objections to this, so Raven says they should proceed with the duel immediately. While they are walking off so Reitz can fight Ars' father, Reitz stops for a moment and asks why Ars is working so just to take someone like him as a retainer. The offer makes him happy, but it honestly seems too good to be true considering he is persecuted wherever he goes because he is a Malkin. Ars assures him that he is only going through all this effort because Reitz is important to him. He will one day become the Lord of the land, and when that day comes, he wants to have Reitz by his side, so Reitz promises to do his best to win. They arrive at the practice grounds and everyone is confused about what's going on here. Raven asks for practice swords and an hourglass to be brought to them, and once the equipment is ready, he explains that all Reitz needs to do is land a single blow on him within the time limit to be declared the victor of the match. Ars thinks this might work out in his favor if those are the requirements, since even if Raven is the best swordsman in the land, Reitz's skill should be enough for him to at least land one blow on him. The duel begins so Raven charges at Reitz with full force, and although Reitz managed to dodge, he can tell that even with just a practice sword, if that strike has landed, it would be cleaning the pieces of his body from the floor. Raven is stronger than him, but Reitz is still able to hold his ground against him in the fight. The other soldiers are impressed that he is able to keep up with Raven at all since none of them have managed to do so, and that was when he was going easy on them. But right now, Raven is going after Reitz without holding back. At that moment, Reitz gets hit with a strike to the shoulder which sends him bouncing off the floor. He gets back up and looks over to Ars, who is rooting for him, so he regains his motivation to continue the fight and charges in with a new strategy. He ducks under Raven's first strike, and once behind him, he uses the glare of the sun as cover to block Raven's vision and land a strike. Raven still manages to block the strike, but once Reitz steps back to create distance, he announces that this duel is over. Reitz looks back to make sure he hadn't run out of time, that the hourglass still had some sand left in it, meaning Reitz has successfully landed a hit on Raven, even if it was just a light stroke. Everyone is shocked by the feat Reitz has just accomplished, and Raven congratulates him on his victory. He admits that Ars was right when he said that Reitz had an amazing talent, and after seeing it for himself, he is sure he may become a top-class swordsman in the future. Ars also has a bright future ahead of him if he was able to find such talent so easily. He had been worried about how Ars would handle the chaos in the world right now when the time came, but it looks like he has nothing to fear. Ars may even manage to become the new emperor of the land, but that's a little ambitious for the lord of such a small village. Reitz has also become quite popular among the soldiers, now that they have seen what he can do, and a little while later, Ars goes to see if Reitz has adjusted to his new life here. He is dressed in his new uniform as he has decided to take on servant duties as well, since he wishes to help out as much as possible. He also expresses his immense gratitude to Ars for saving him from a life on the streets, and to repay that debt, he will stand by his side from now on. After a few months of Reitz being a part of the household, and he has been adapting to it quite nicely. For the most part, he has been staying by Ars' side, rather than partaking in battles. And with all the tutoring he has had, he has become one of the most knowledgeable people in the whole house, so both the people of the town and the house have come to accept him as one of them. This is further emphasized when Ars hears a couple of maids talking about how handsome and hardworking Reitz is. Reitz soon approaches Ars because they have a scheduled lesson together, so Ars happily puts down his book and joins him as Reitz goes on to explain the history of the Summerforth Empire. It was once composed of 7 individual nations, but of those nations, Ansel took advantage of its strategic position to conduct trade operations with all the other kingdoms. Eventually, Ansel invaded and conquered the neighboring kingdom, having the entire continent under the control of Ansel's king, Anathus Bidoras. The continent was later renamed the Summerforth Empire, and all this happened 200 years ago, but now the Summerforth Empire is in dire straits. The acting king, Bidoras VIII, is only 8 years old, so all the power is actually held by his retainers, who are more concerned with gathering wealth and power for themselves than with the longevity of the empire. With the current power system, people have begun to lose faith in the empire, and revolts have been popping up left and right as a result. For these reasons, several provinces made the decision to ditch the whole loyalty to the crown thing and instead focus on keeping themselves afloat. Right now, they are just a minor problem, but Ars' father is already being dispatched to deal with them. So one day they may be a serious threat, and Ars needs to be prepared for that. He asks Reitz if he has any idea where Ground Zero would be if a major revolt were to happen. So he points to the Mission province as a likely spot. Their ruler is currently old and in poor health, so once he's out of the picture, all hell is going to break loose. He has 2 sons who could take his place, and normally it would be the oldest, but the youngest is actually better suited for it than him. This will most certainly lead to a war, since both brothers want to inherit the position, and Ars wants to know who Raven would choose to follow if that ends up happening. From what Reitz knows, Raven believes it is the older brother's right to succeed their father. Ars is worried, since if his father ends up on the losing side of the conflict, then things could end up going really badly. Although while Ars is nervous, Reitz sees this as a good opportunity to rise up in the world for Raven. After all, a good showing in a major conflict will be a great addition to his accomplishments, so Reitz suggests they try to prepare for the occasion in order to make the outcome more certain. To do that, they are going to need to find more talented people, so Ars and Reitz prepare to head into town. As they leave, they spot Raven, who has been training far more frequently in preparation for the looming war. Once he notices his son, Raven asks if he plans to head into town today, and Ars confirms it, adding that he wants to look for some more exceptionally talented people. Since Ars' track record speaks for itself, Raven trusts that he will find someone amazing, but he asks that Ars try his best to find someone who has a talent for magic, because it would be of great assistance in battles to come. Raven is unable to use magic on his own, and his retainers who can use it aren't particularly gifted in the art, yet magic could easily turn the tide of a battle. So finding a gifted magic user is important. Ars and Reitz head out to the capital of Canary to find a magic user, but Ars is shocked to see so many people filling the city streets. According to the information Reitz had gathered, the city has a population of about 50,000, which is way more than Ars had imagined it would be. This place is ruled by the House of Pyres, and the people here look very wealthy, which I'm sure wasn't achieved by any nefarious means, so Ars wishes to someday provide this kind of life for his people back in Lamberg. There are a lot of people to choose from, so Reitz is sure they'll find someone adequate for the job in no time at all. However, even as Ars scans through every single individual in the town square, he doesn't find a single person that would be a promising mage. For now, since they haven't had much luck finding any gifted people, Reitz suggests that they both go grab some lunch while they take a break. Ars is happy with that idea, but as they are heading to a market, they walk past an alleyway where Ars learns that things are never as pleasant as they seem at first glance. Reitz explains that no matter what, wherever there is wealth and prosperity, there will also be the poor and decrepit. But even though he was the exact same way a few months ago, he has to let Ars know that there's nothing he can realistically do to change all their situations now. He had looked at the flashy town earlier and thought it was wonderful, but with a sight like this, his opinion has changed. What he wants to create is a town where even the less fortunate are able to make a living for themselves. And though he knows he is just being wishful, he would like to find a talented mage among one of the poor people here, so he can at least save one person. While he says this, there is a cloaked girl listening in on their conversation, but she soon slinks away from the two. Ars and Reitz make it to the market, and Ars is drooling over all the amazing food available here when he gets called out by a fishy stall owner. He offers Ars the chance to buy a dragon egg from the northern region and have his very own pet dragon, which he is very excited to hear since he didn't even know dragons existed in this world till just now. He really wants a pet dragon, so he reaches into his bag and says he'll buy 3. But then Reitz pulls out a knife and holds the stall owner at the blade's edge. He is insanely angry that someone would dare try to scam Ars in front of him, and although the scammer tries to deny any wrongdoing, Reitz knows better. Trade with the northern region was frozen last year, so the only way he could actually get dragon eggs was if he illegally smuggled them in. But even at that, these are just regular old lizard eggs from the Ansel region. Reitz won't take such blatant disrespect to his master, so he is prepared to kill this man right now. However, Ars doesn't want to get into any trouble for murdering a local, so he tells Reitz to just let it go since it was his own fault for nearly falling for it. Reitz realizes that he is making a scene, so he calms down and apologizes to Ars for being so hot-headed. After finally getting some food to eat, Ars notices a candy stall across the street, so he runs over to go get some for himself. But as he pulls out his money pouch, a girl bumps into him, and his pouch gets poached. He doesn't notice what happened at first, but as Reitz comes running up, Ars is informed that he just got robbed, so he starts panicking. Reitz assures him that they will be able to get it back as he picks Ars up to chase after the girl. But even with his speed, the girl is still so fast that Reitz only manages to pull off her cloak. They follow her into an alleyway, but it looks like they aren't the only ones who are after her, as she has been cornered by a group of 3 guys who really don't like her. The girl gets punched to the floor, and even though she just stole from him, Ars can't bear to see someone get treated so badly. The man doesn't like being told what to do by a kid, so he's about to give Ars the same punch. But Reitz obliviously isn't going to let him get away with it. He warns the man to not continue with his attack, but the man doesn't surrender, so he gets a 1 piece to the gut before being thrown like a bag of dirt. His 2 friends try to jump in and avenge their buddy, but they both get manhandled by Reitz as well, eventually deciding to just take the L and leave. Now that they are gone, Ars asks if the girl is alright, but then he gets a good look at her, and she's fucking amazing. She has S-rank potential as a mage, which is exactly what Ars was looking for. So while Reitz walks up to her to demand Ars' money pouch back, Ars asks her if she would like to become one of his retainers. This shocks both the girl and Reitz since they can't believe he would hire someone who just stole from him, but Ars is serious about it since he can see her immense aptitude for magic. The girl answers coldly, saying she would rather die than serve a child like Ars, and when asked why she gave such a strong refusal, she says that there are just some things she can't stand. And Ars is one of them. Besides, she says she has never used magic before, so there's no way she could be as adept as Ars is claiming. Ars tries to convince her by saying he can tell that she would be great at magic. She looks broke and smelly, so the offer of a job and a home should be really appealing to her. However, she gets offended and thinks Ars is looking down on her since he has been living the easy life since the day he was born. She has no interest in becoming the pawn of some noble who is only interested in protecting their lifestyle, but Ars says he is not like that. He wants to create a world where people like her can have stable lifestyles and earn a decent income without having to steal. His ideals are great and all, but promises are cheap, and the people here don't have the luxury of waiting for this someday to come because they are worried about what they'll eat today. So her answer is still no. Reitz can't make her change her mind, but he hasn't forgotten about the money pouch she stole, so he demands that she return it once more, which she does without putting up a fight. Ars still hasn't given up, so he tries to keep the conversation going by asking who those guys that were after her are. She explains that a while ago she got caught stealing from a noble, so she ended up getting sold to a slave trader as punishment. She managed to escape, but the slave trader sent those guys after her because she would be sold for a high price on the market. If that's the case, then Ars asks why she is still in this town, all since it would be much smarter to ditch this place and get as far away as possible so the slave trader doesn't catch her. She responds that she can't just leave this place because she's got people here whom she cares for. At that same moment, a bunch of kids come running to her. They have been worried sick for the past 2 days since they didn't know what happened to her. These kids are all orphans with no one to turn to, so the girl took it upon herself to take care of them, and that means she can't leave them behind. Ars understands the situation now, so he won't try to recruit the girl anymore, but he still wants to help their situation, so he offers her his money to keep them going for a while. She still thinks he is just trying to act like a good person. But since he did offer, she's not going to turn down free money. She takes the money and leaves with the kids, but Ars is left with a lot to think about after what he has seen. Later on, Ars sits outside his hotel room late into the night and thinks about the whole thing until Reitz comes to tell him to get inside before he catches a cold. He sees that Ars is still upset about his encounter with the girl, but he can understand how she felt at the time. Most nobles aren't exactly great people, so it is never a good idea to blindly trust what one says at first, but he assures Ars that he isn't one of the bad nobles since he actually wants to help people. Still, Ars gets the feeling the girl may have been right about him taking his privileged lifestyle for granted with him, making such a grandiose claim of bringing a better quality of life to the poor people. He honestly hadn't thought it through much, so he needs to do some reflecting on himself. Just then, Ars' self-reflection is interrupted as he sees those kids from before running down the street, and they are in a panic because Charlotte, the girl from before, has been caught by the slave traders. Charlotte has just been dragged back to the slave trader's office by his lackeys, and the goons who were forced to chase after her take their frustrations out by giving her an extra beating for making them work so hard. Even while she's getting kicked over and over, Charlotte doesn't cry or fight back because she has more or less accepted her fate. The slave trader tells the goons to lay off beating her because he's got a buyer willing to pay big bucks for her, and the dude's a real pervert, so he wants Charlotte's face in good condition. Since the boss ordered it, they agree to leave her alone, but then they notice the sack of money she has with her and pick it up as a bonus for themselves. However, while she doesn't care about herself, that money is where she draws the line. She gets up and tries to run away after grabbing the bag, but she is immediately slammed back to the ground. The slave trader tries to convince her to give up on running away since even if she did manage to escape, she would just end up going back to the life of misery on the streets, so she should just accept that she has lost and become some random guy's slave. Just when all hope seemed lost, a loud crash is heard as Reitz bursts through the front door with his gloves ready to pound some faces in. The goons recognize him as the same guy from earlier, but they seem to have forgotten how badly they were beaten. So Reitz gives them a quick reminder by knocking them out again. The slave trader tells the last guy not to attack because he can't win, so instead, he starts questioning why Ars would suddenly bust down the doors to another man's house for no reason. Ars gets up and addresses Albert, the slave trader, telling him that he wants Charlotte to be released at once. By this point, Albert has realized that Ars is probably a noble, so he calms down a bit since nobles are the primary buyers for his slaves, but Ars is a little different from the normal selfish noble. Charlotte tries to stop Ars and tells him to stay out of this since he has no reason to put himself in danger for her sake, but he doesn't need a reason to do the right thing. Since he met her, he had been wondering why she always had that blank look on her face, and now he knows why. It's because her ambition stat is stuck at a 1. Albert has no idea what Ars is talking about, so Ars explains that ambition is what drives a person to keep improving themselves and aim for greater heights, but with hers being stuck at only 1, she's totally given up on all aspirations for the future. Albert laughs, saying it's obvious she would give up on her future since she's only a slave now, but Ars doesn't see what's so funny about it and gets angry over it. As Charlotte watches Ars get angry for her sake, she is sent into a flashback of the moment when she first lost hope for her life. It was the moment she realized that no matter how hard she tried, She would never amount to anything even close to what she saw other people have, so from then on, she decided to focus on surviving first and nothing else so she doesn't have to face the injustice of the world. Albert has had enough of entertaining Ars's self-righteous speech, so even if he is the son of a noble, he's a noble. He is going to have to make him disappear. Charlotte sees what's about to go down, so she pleads with Ars to get out of here before something bad happens to him because of her, but Ars assures her that he isn't the one in danger here. He calls over to Ritz and tells him it is okay to lose his temper for now and murder is on the table, so as one of the goons approaches him, he palms the guy's neck and has the guy's feet dangling in the air before he slams him into the ground. Even after what they just witnessed, the rest of the goons still think they can handle him in a fight, so they try to surround Ritz to take him down, but none of them are able to last more than 5 seconds. By the time he is done with pummeling, there are 3 dead and several injured scattered across the room, so Albert is left with no other choice but to call in his big guns. He yells for someone to get down here, and this huge guy starts coming down the stairs while complaining that they are interrupting his booze time. Charlotte is getting nervous because the guy is absolutely huge, and Albert's confidence is restored because his secret weapon is here to save him. This guy was an infantry captain in the army, although they kicked him out for bad behavior. Now all he cares about is his booze, which Albert is happy to supply as long as he does his job and kills the intruders. Just to be safe, Ars uses his ability to check if this guy is actually a threat, and after analyzing him, he assures Charlotte that there is nothing to worry about since Ritz can definitely handle this guy. The big guy is still confident in his capabilities since he is only up against a little kid, but Ritz is no ordinary kid, as the guy will soon find out. He takes his swing, but he connects with nothing but air as Ritz leaped into the air to dodge. And while hanging from the chandelier, he jumps down while stomping down on the big guy's neck. After the guy gets back up, Ritz gives him a nasty uppercut to take him out of the picture entirely, and Charlotte is left wondering who Ars and Ritz really are. Albert is visibly shaken by the turn of events, but he still insists that Ars and Ritz have no right to do this to him since the foreman of the Canary district made slave trading legal. Ars is aware of that, which is why he came here with the intention of paying for Charlotte's freedom. And while Albert is probably thinking that information would have been useful before they started fighting, he can't just sell Charlotte to Ars because he already has a buyer for her. Ritz steps up and tells Albert that he's only got 2 choices here: the easy way or the hard way, but either way, Ritz is still fully capable of just taking Charlotte and leaving since they can't stop him, so it would be in his best interest to accept the money and spin a story that someone came and offered a better price. Alternatively, he could refuse and have his reputation ruined because he openly got robbed of a slave, but the choice is up to him. Given the options he has, Albert is forced to concede and agrees to let them take Charlotte, so Ars and Ritz both turn back to Charlotte, and since everything is finally settled, Ars stretches out his hand to Charlotte, saying they should probably get back to her friends since they are worried sick about her. Charlotte doesn't say a word to him, but her opinion of Ars has changed a lot in the past few minutes. As they are leaving, Charlotte stops for a moment and says there is a place she wants to visit before they return. She leads them deep into the forest to show them something, but Ars' stubby child feet aren't made for hiking, so he's exhausted long before they actually make it there. After a few more minutes of walking, Charlotte says they've arrived, so Ars looks up and is pleasantly surprised by the amazing view he gets to see. This has always been her secret spot since when she sees the whole town from up here. Her problems always seem small in comparison. If a spot is so special to her, Ars asks why she would choose to share it with him. She brings up what Ars had said earlier about wanting to create a town where people like her can live stable lives, but she wants to know why he cares so much in the first place. Ars answers that it is because he likes children, which doesn't make a lot of sense to her since he's still basically a toddler compared to her, but hear him out for a second. He's had a whole life in Japan before he reincarnated here, and something that always managed to lift his spirits when he was tired was the smile of a child, and that's because a child's smile is so full of hope and just plain cute. So he wants to protect those smiles no matter what. Charlotte is satisfied with that answer, so she agrees to go with Ars after all. Ars is happy, but he thought she had a commitment to those kids, so she couldn't leave. That may be true, but the reason she is leaving is because she wants to help Ars make a place where they can have hope for the future. Since she'll be joining them, Ritz asks to see her demonstrate her talent for magic using this magic tool. Ars asks where he got that, and he just so happened to find it on the floor of a house they just visited, although it was attached to an unconscious body. It's not that he doubts that she has talent since Ars recommended her after all, but he wants to see it for himself so he can respect her as a comrade. She agrees to try, but she makes no promises since this is literally the first time she's ever tried magic. Reese shows her how to cast a basic spell, and Ars waits in anticipation since he doesn't know how much power a person with S-rank mage potential would have. As Reese finishes showing her how to cast the spell, she points her hand to the sky and recites the incantation, causing flames to gather around her hand, and eventually a massive blast is fired off, creating a huge explosion in the sky. Both Ars and Reese are left in stunned silence over what they've just witnessed, and the people of the region are left wondering if they are being bombed or something. Charlotte takes a moment to accept that she actually just did that, and after that, she turns to Ars and Reese, who still have their mouths open in shock. Ars already knew she was amazing at magic, but seeing it with his own eyes is still an amazing sight. Before they go, however, Charlotte has one more request to ask. She wants to confirm that being his retainer means she will get a place to stay and food to eat, which Ars assures her of. She will also be getting a monthly salary, although it won't be that much. Since that's the arrangement, Charlotte asks if Ars could send her salary to the kid she was looking after, since they'll have a hard time getting by without her around. All she really needs is a place to stay and some food to eat anyway. Ars agrees to do that for her and says he can't wait to see what her future holds. She gets down on one knee and pledges to do everything in her power to make Ars' dream come true, but Ars tells her to quit being so formal because he finds it awkward. He tells her she can just talk to him like normal, and she agrees to do just that because she doesn't like speaking formally either. Now that he has accomplished what he came here to do, Ars thinks it is about time they return home, especially since they have already spent all the money they have on hand anyway. They head back into town, where Charlotte says goodbye to the kids in town, and right before leaving to return to house, they take a little snack break. Charlotte never really learned table manners, or any manners for that matter, so Reese is going to have to drill them into her brain so she doesn't end up disgracing Ars in the future, but she doesn't like the idea of having to learn boring stuff like that. After a long journey, they later arrive back at House Leuven, and Ars introduces his father to Charlotte, but his initial reaction upon seeing the new mage is refusal, since he believes the battlefield is too dangerous for a girl like her. However, once he sees her create a dragon-level explosion with a basic fire spell, he immediately changes his attitude and welcomes her to House Leuven. A few years after Charlotte joined, Raven returns after yet another battle, and Ars is there to greet him as soon as he arrives. He's glad to see that everyone made it back safely, so he asks his father how the battle went this time around. Raven is happy to say that it was an overwhelming victory, and largely because of Charlotte, who has grown in several ways over the past few years. Ever since she was inducted into the mage unit, she has been the star of the show and quickly became one of the most feared mages in the country. Because of her, their mage unit is now regarded as the pride of the Hovent, right alongside the infantry unit. Ars knew Charlotte was talented from the moment he saw her, but he never would have guessed that she would make such a difference by herself, so he is even more motivated to find more exceptionally skilled people. In other news, Ars now has a baby brother and sister, and Ars can already see that they will be valuable members of the family from their stats. Just then, Reitz comes into the room and says he has excellent news for Ars, since there might be some new talent in town. A family of hunters has just moved in, and two of the boys are really strong and tall, so the townspeople are singing their praises. They won't know for sure if they are the kind of talent Ars is looking for until he sees them with his own eyes, so he and Reitz soon prepare to go and meet this family. Reitz has been told that they live out in the forest near the town, so they'll need to go by horseback, but before they depart, their attention is drawn to Charlotte, who is having lunch in the tree above them. She asks where they are headed, so Ars explains that they are going to scout out some new prospects for talent. If that's what they are doing, Charlotte says she'll accompany Ars as an escort since she has the day off, and Ars is happy to have her come. But he didn't expect the ride to be so awkward since it's cramped with three of them on the same horse. Charlotte complains about the horse being slow, but Reitz tells her that it's her fault for insisting on coming along and weighing them down. Just then, a wild animal runs past, and an arrow flies through the trees, impaling and killing the animal. Shortly after, two brothers emerge from the brush and are happy to see that they caught their prey. But in the middle of their banter, they notice that there are other people in the area, so they apologize for firing so carelessly and putting them in possible danger. Ars gets a good look at them and realizes that these are the two hunter boys they were looking for, and they are pretty impressive since Gatos has A-rank infantry skills, and Marcus has A-rank archery skills. The boys find it a bit strange for people to be out in this part of the woods, so they ask what Ars and the others came here to do, which is when Ars tells them that he has a proposal he wants to offer. The boys invited Ars to their home, where their father has prepared a delicious feast for them, but he apologizes for not being able to do more for such important guests. Ars says he has nothing to be sorry about since he dropped in unannounced, and Charlotte thinks the meal they prepared is really delicious anyway. The boy's father then asks what business Ars has with them all the way out in the forest, So Ars tells them that he is here to recruit Gatos and Marcus as soldiers to join the Luvan army. This is great news for the two boys since they always wanted to make a name for themselves as soldiers, and their father is grateful for the opportunity, but he wishes his other son, Rosal, could have talent like Marcus and Gatos. Ars didn't know the man had another son, so he asks where he is now. So Charlotte points out the redhead boy that just slipped past them to take a loaf of bread. The father scolds Rosal for trying to sneak away without saying hello to the son of the Lord of the Land. So Rosal does his best to give a greeting, but while he is doing that, Ars takes a look at him, and he sees that Rosal's intelligence has a max of 109. That's probably the highest in all of Leuven, and though it may be only at 45 right now, he is a 5-year-old, so it's to be expected. With proper training, Ars believes Rosal would be an excellent retainer, so he asks him to become one. Ars believes his offer is a great deal, but Rosal wants nothing to do with wars, so he sees Ars and the others as cruel tyrants who are trying to force him to die on the battlefield. So he says a firm hell no and shuts himself back in his room. Ars can't believe he got rejected, so the father explains that Rosal is pretty timid and frail compared to his brothers. His mother died 2 years ago, so he has been withdrawn ever since then. Normally at his age as the son of a hunter, he should be out chopping firewood or learning how to hunt, but as he is now, he would barely be able to survive on his own, much less go to war. Ars explains that he doesn't want Rosal to become a soldier because that's not what he is suited for. The talent he possesses is one that would make him an excellent strategist, and now that he thinks about it, the father had noticed that Rosal has always been rather clever. Ars wants to ask him one more time to become a retainer, so he enters Rosal's room, but he only ends up scaring him even more than before. Ars apologizes for startling him, but then he notices that Rosal was reading a book, so he asks if he enjoys reading. Rosal confirms his love for reading, although this is the only book they have and his mother used to read it to him before she passed away. Ars feels bad for Rosal, so he asks him if he would like to come to the library in his house and take some books. Rosal is excited to hear this at first, but he doesn't trust Ars' intentions and thinks he is going to try and force him into the army as payment for the books he uses. But Ars denies such underhanded motives and says he just wants to help Rosal explore his love for reading. If that's really all he wants, then Rosal agrees to go, but only if his brothers can come along for his safety. Once they get to Ars' house, Rosal immediately begins screaming his lungs out when a dog starts licking him, so his brothers tell him to calm down since it's not going to hurt him. They are amazed by how large Ars' house is, so Ars offers to have Charlotte show him around the place since she is the head of the mage unit, but she really doesn't want to. That is, until they both express how awesome they think she is, so she takes a liking to them immediately. While Charlotte is showing them around, Ars takes Rosal to the library and Rosal is amazed beyond measure because he has never seen so many books in one place before. He is free to read as much as he likes here, but Ars says he has to get going since he has his daily lessons to complete, so Reitz will be here for him in case he needs anything. A few hours later, Ars had fallen asleep at his desk, and once he wakes up, he frantically ran downstairs to speak with Rosal before he leaves. He makes his way to the library and asks Reitz if Rosal is still here, but Rosal is passed out on the floor since he exhausted himself trying to read as much as possible. Reitz is impressed with what Rosal is capable of since he read and understand concepts he had never heard of almost immediately. So Ars takes a look at Rosal's stats and he can see that his intelligence is already shooting up. Just then, Charlotte and the two brothers arrive to pick Rosal up, but they see him passed out in a pile of books. They are glad to see he is doing what he loves, but they can't understand what Rosal finds so interesting about books since he never learned to read. Ars is shocked to find out that Rosal never learned to read, so when he gets back up, he asks how he learned to read. Rosal explains that when he was little, he could remember his mother reading to him, so he just matched the words she said to the words on the page, and eventually he was able to read on his own. His brothers have a hard time believing that since he was only 3 years old when their mother used to read to him, but Rosal just says he is able to remember everything since the day he was born, so everyone is even more shocked. After hearing just how amazing Rosal is, Ars is willing to do anything to win Rosal over. Later, Ars is thinking of a way to show Rosal and his family that there are ways to hunt without needing to be physically gifted, as that may give Rosal the confidence to become his retainer. He tells them that traps are a common method for hunting in other countries, but Marcus and Gatos don't think it will be effective against the animals here since they are pretty smart and quick. However, Ars has faith that Rosal's brain can come up with something that will be effective, and then his father will surely have to acknowledge him as a capable hunter. Rosal doesn't think he'll be able to do something like that, but his brothers are here to support him and say they will do anything to help him. Rosal wants to prove that he can be useful, so he agrees to give it his best shot, and after a lot of off-screen work, a trap has been constructed. Rosel's father comes out a while later and he is shocked by what he sees before him. The boys see him and excitedly show off what Rosel was able to come up with as they tell their father how to look inside the trap. The father obliges and he is shocked to see that it is full of animals. The brothers proudly state that it was all Rosel's idea, so they push him to tell their father how he came up with it. Russell timidly says that he learned that these animals mindlessly charge at anything that is the color yellow, so he used a painted wall to get them to run into the trap. It's safe to use it since no human would ever fall for it, probably, and he also came up with a way to keep baby animals away by hanging herbs, which they are known to avoid. Rosel's father just stands there dumbfounded because he has just realized two things. Rosel is a genius, and he just made the family business of hunting obsolete with this trap, and it only took him one day to come up with it. After processing his thoughts, he asks the older brothers if they are leaving tomorrow to join the Leuven army, and once they confirm it, he tells them to take Rosel with them. Rosel doesn't know where his father's sudden change in attitude came from, but his father is adamant that Rosel needs to leave home, and he has nothing else to say besides that, so he walks away. Rosel now believes his father must hate him for making hunting redundant, so he accepts that he's just going to have to go with Ars since he has nowhere else to go. But Ars tells him that he can't leave yet, at least until he has cleared up this misunderstanding with his father. Rosel's mother fell ill shortly after he was born, so he has always believed that his father hated him for being the reason their mother died. Even though they never said that, he believes that's what they all think about him, which is why he always locks himself in his room. Right now, he is wishing he had never been born, but then he hears some movement on the roof, and it happens to be his father and brothers. Marcus and Gatos both came to thank their father for raising them well, but they ask him why he had to talk to Rosel in that way earlier. The trap he built was amazing, and Rosel made it so that the father wouldn't have to work so hard, so there was no need to be so harsh on him like that. The father knows he shouldn't have talked to Rosel like he did, but he feels as though he has failed him as a father by not recognizing his talents. He would only focus on what Rosel couldn't do, but Rosel is really kind, so even though he was never acknowledged, he is still concerned about helping a failure of a father like him rather than pursuing his calling. So the only way he could think of to get Rosel to leave was to make him resent him as a father. The next day, Ars arrives to escort the brothers back to the manor, and Rosel seems really determined to go with him. So his father believes that he must hate him after all and doesn't bother trying to say goodbye so Rosel can go live a better life without regrets. However, Rosel turns back to him and says he could never hate him no matter what. Rosel admits that he has been useless to the family until now, so the reason he is going with Ars is so that he can learn all kinds of things so he can be useful. And once he has done that, he wants to come back and live with his father. His father is brought to tears after hearing that Rosel still loves him, so they take a moment to say their heartfelt goodbyes to one another. Marcus and Gagos thank Ars for convincing Rosel to stay and giving him the chance to reconcile with his father before becoming his retainer, but Ars never really cared if Rosel joined him or not. He just wanted to see him happy, because at the end of the day, he may be amazing talent, but he is also one of Ars' people. Sometime later, Raven falls ill, and Ars is sitting with him at his bedside and pleading with him not to go on the next mission in his current state. Unfortunately, Raven is obligated to go because, with the current state of things in the world, there is simply no other choice. The governor of Mission had passed away recently, and in his will, he named his younger son as the one to inherit the throne. However, as expected, the older brother could not accept his father's will. He claimed that the documents were forged and thus began a civil war with his brother. Although the majority of people had thought of the older brother as an incompetent fool, he had managed to make a name for himself through several battle victories, so in turn, he managed to garner the support of a decent amount of retainers in his quest for power. And due to the ensuing civil war, the neighboring country of Seats decided to take advantage and invade while the country of Mission is divided among themselves. This will mean another battle needs to be fought, but Raven tells Ars to stop worrying about it because he has got more pressing matters to attend to, like the fact that his wife will be arriving here shortly. Ars is understandably shocked because this is the first time he's hearing anything about him getting married, but I guess Raven just forgot to mention it. He pulls out a letter he received earlier from the girl in question, and upon receiving it, Ars immediately runs to his retainers to tell them the bad news. Upon hearing that Ars has a betrothed, they are all equally as shocked as him. This is the first he has heard anything about her, and a maid comes in to tell him that his soon-to-be wife is outside already, so he has literally no time to prepare. He heads outside to meet her as the carriage pulls up, but he's nervous as hell since even in his past life, he never had a girlfriend. And now he's just meant to handle a wife out of nowhere. But after seeing her for the first time, he realizes that he may have hit the jackpot on this one. But then he gets a look at her stats, and her diplomacy and ambition are through the roof, so she is naturally inclined to be conniving. He is immediately put on guard because she may just be putting on a nice act to make a good impression on him, and for all he knows, she may be here to dispose of him since his father is currently ill. He mustn't let himself fall for her charms, but that's not going to be an easy task since she is really pulling at his heartstrings. After snapping out of it, he offers to show her around the estate. But as they walk in, Lucia's butler sees Reitz for the first time and he still has a few racist tendencies, so he is shocked that they have someone like him here. However, Licia will not stand for such rude comments and certainly not directed to someone her future husband trusts with his life. She tells Jan to apologize for his statements immediately, which he does, and Ars's opinion of Licia improves a little. As she is shown around the estate and meets all the people who work here, she has nothing but good things to say about everyone here. And while she and Ars are sharing a meal together, she talks about how delicious the meat in the food is, which gets Ars to start explaining the whole story behind how they came up with a new trap system. But in his excitement, he failed to notice that he had a little sauce on his cheek, so he gets embarrassed when she points it out. Ars must admit to himself that Licia is a master at communication if she is able to keep a conversation going with him, and in addition, she is quick-witted and more beautiful than anyone he has ever seen before. If he hadn't seen her stats, he would have been head over heels for her by now. But that aside, Licia continues the conversation by mentioning that she got to see a little bit of Lambert while she was on her way here, and she is truly delighted by how lively it is. Ars agrees with her and says he would have personally shown her around town had the weather been more favorable, but Licia tells him that she doesn't think that's going to be a problem since the rain isn't going to last long. A few moments later, the rain clears up just as she had said it would, and Ars is utterly amazed, so he asks if she has the ability to control the weather or something. She tells him that it's nothing as special as weather powers, but rather, she just watched the clouds on her way here, and she was able to tell that the rain wouldn't last long from how the clouds moved. And since the sky is clear again, Ars will be able to show her around town after all. Meanwhile, outside the door, Rosal and Charlotte are spying on Ars's lunch date, and Charlotte asks Rosal what he thinks about Licia, and from what he can tell, she is the very definition of an ideal wife. But you would be lying if you said she didn't seem a little scary. Charlotte was thinking the exact same thing, but that's mainly because she is jealous of her. Ars and Licia head out into town, and he introduces her to the people as his future wife, so they are all excited and plan to throw a celebration for him. However, close by, there is an argument going on between two men, so Ars and Licia rush over to see what's going on. The reason for the disagreement is that a furniture maker says he placed an order for fire Maggie stones, but the seller brought sound Maggie stones, and they are now arguing over whose fault this is. Since he is going to be the future lord of the land, Ars thinks he should try to do something about this dispute, but he can't afford to fail since one slip up here would show weakness, and he can't let Licia see any signs of weakness from him until he has made sure of her intentions. Just then, Charlotte and Rosal show up, and Charlotte asks if Ars would like her to settle it, since one hit from her magic should be enough to put an end to their quarrels as well as their lives. Licia is against the idea, so she states her disapproval, but then she mentions how much of a fan she is of Charlotte since she is widely renowned as the most famous in the land. All that praise was enough to get Charlotte to like Licia in no time, so Licia then moves on to the next issue and asks Ars if he would be willing to let her settle the dispute. And if she manages to succeed in her attempt, she would like him to do her a favor. She then approaches the two men and gets their attention, so they'll stop fighting, at which point she introduces herself as Licia Plaid. Licia goes on to tell them that she may have a solution to their predicament, so she offers to buy the sound Maggie stones that they have, since they are rather rare in her region. And conversely, she also has a large number of flame Maggie stones in stock, so she can arrange for some to be sold to them at a reasonable rate. And after providing such a convenient solution, she tells them that this whole thing was Ars' idea, thereby giving him all the credit. The people begin thanking him for being such a huge help to them, but Ars has a request to make of them so that incidents like these don't happen in the future. He wants every business transaction to have a contract made so that the terms are as clear as possible. They agree to do that from now on, and Ars thanks Licia for the help in settling the dispute since things worked out perfectly, and now he's even more convinced of how amazing her diplomacy skills are. A while later, they are still walking through town, so Ars apologizes to her for making her move around so much, but she says it's fine since she managed to learn a lot from the tour. But now that they are alone, she asks if she can tell him what that favor she was talking about earlier was. Ars had already anticipated this, so he braces himself for any unreasonable demands she may make, but the only thing she wants from him is an honest answer. She asks him what kind of person he likes, and Ars is thrown for a loop since he can't figure out what Licia's intentions are. Eventually, he just gives up on trying to outthink her since he knows she is too smart for that. So instead, he decides to answer the question straightforwardly. So he tells her that he likes people who are honest and don't try to hide things from him. So Lisha smiles and says she will keep that in mind before continuing to walk, leaving Ars even more confused than before. The rest of the day went on without much, but in the end, Ars was unable to figure out what Lisha's real intentions are. But since she'll be staying the night here, he decides to just try again tomorrow and gets ready to climb into bed. However, as he lifts the covers, he finds Lisha hiding on his bed, and it's the biggest shock he has received all day. He questions if Lisha is aware that this is meant to be his room, and she is fully aware of it. But she just thought it would be funny to sneak into his room and catch him off guard. Jokes aside, she does have a reason for coming here, as she brings up what Ars had said earlier about liking girls who don't hide things from him. So she is here to have an honest conversation with him. Ars pours Lisha a cup of tea before asking her what exactly it is that she wants to talk about with him. Lisha doesn't hesitate and immediately asks Ars to tell her what he thinks about her, a statement which makes Ars spit up his own tea. He asks what she means by that, so Lisha explains that she has a special talent to be able to tell what someone feels just by looking at them, and when she first met Ars, the emotion he displayed was that of suspicion. Of course, being suspicious of someone you just met is normal, which is why Lisha prides herself on being able to gain people's trust after just a few conversations. However, everything she tried to gain Ars' favor only managed to make him even more suspicious of her. So she wants to know what it is that he finds suspicious about her. Ars can understand why she would be uneasy about his suspicion of her, since she obviously would never have guessed that someone would be able to see her stats, and he could probably dodge the question if he wanted to, but Ars chooses to be honest with her instead. He tells her that he has the ability to see people's attributes and aptitudes, so when he first saw her, he could tell that she has incredibly high diplomacy stats, as well as a higher level of ambition than most people. This led him to believe that everything she would do would be a calculated step, so he kept his guard up in case she had any ulterior motives. He's not sure if Lisha will believe him, but she says she believes him since what he said actually perfectly explains his behavior. And it is true that she has great ambitions, so Ars asks what those ambitions may be, which gets Lisha a little flustered, but she ultimately admits that her dream is to find an amazing man to fall in love with her. But that's so anticlimactic that Ars is left speechless, and the awkward silence is unbearable for Lisha. Ars is slowly falling victim to her charms now that he knows she's not a threat, but if he really thinks about it, with the current era, her best shot at a successful life hinges on getting married to the most powerful and capable man, but by comparison to others, House Leuven isn't especially large or powerful, so getting betrothed to someone like Ars must be less than ideal for her. Lisha can tell exactly what Ars is thinking, and while it may be true that House Leuven's territory is quite small, she's more interested in Ars as a person, which is why her initial plan was to see if Ars was an idiot or not. However, after getting to spend the day with him, she is convinced that Ars is the man she wishes to marry. The territory may still be small, but that's just for now, since she is sure that in the future, Ars will be able to do amazing things and become a great man. Lisha decides to call it a night, so she gets up to return to her room, and after she leaves, Ars begins kicking himself over fumbling his first ever confession like that, but he is happy that Lisha shared her honest feelings with him. Meanwhile, outside his door, Lisha is regretting the decision to share her feelings because she is utterly embarrassed about the whole thing. However, she is at least glad that she was able to honestly speak with Ars, and she doesn't get to do things like that often. The next day, as Lisha is on the carriage ride to return home, she thinks about how much she has always hated the world of nobility. People constantly lie and never say what they really think, and she was always able to tell when people were being dishonest, so it made her sick to her stomach. But then one day, she heard some noble ladies gossiping about how the girl they used to bully married her way into a position of power above even them. And that was when Lisha realized that the only way to escape the constant lies was to become so powerful that people can't afford to betray you. To do that, she learned to lie her way into the good graces of people, since she had already seen how it's done. Initially, she had no intention of going through with the marriage due to the minor scale of the Leuven territory, but she still wanted to maintain favorable relations, which is why she was laying the charm on him. However, that just made Ars suspicious of her. One thing she managed to learn about him while they were out together, though, is that Ars is truly kind, as emphasized by how well-liked he is among the people. She wants to be a part of the world Ars will build, which is why she chose to stay by his side. She is also sure that his kindness will cause him some trouble with people who want to take advantage of it, so she'll make sure she's there to end them if anyone tries to hurt her darling Ars. After Lisha left, she and Ars began exchanging letters, although Ars is still a bit nervous writing to her. Recently, things have been quite peaceful, with the mission's civil war having died down a bit, and Raven seems to be recovering from his illness as well, so Ars wishes these peaceful times could last forever. Well, it looks like he jinxed it because Raven's condition has just gotten worse and he's going to die sooner or later. But Ars is yet to repay his father for everything he has done for him, so he prays for Raven to hang in there a little longer. Meanwhile, in Castle Encatraz, the governor was sitting in his dark throne room alone, with no guards anywhere nearby, and suddenly the door is opened by a man holding a knife in his hand. The governor immediately tries to get up and run, but unfortunately, his kingly robe gives him -10 mobility, so he falls over and the assassin takes the opportunity to run up to him and stabs his back. Tons of guards enter the room to surround the assassin and take him in for questioning, but the assassin already accomplished what he came for, so he yeets himself out the window and cracks his head open on the pavement like a coconut, so they'll never know who was behind this. A while later, the news of the assassination of the governor of missions reaches Raven, so he calls for a meeting with Ars and his retainers to discuss the situation. He asks Rosal what will happen now that the governor has been killed, and Rosal immediately knows there's going to be a terrible war soon. The governor's death will also cause the succession dispute to escalate to a great degree, and every district in Mission is going to have to side with either the elder brother Kurun or the younger brother Vasmark. The head of the Canare district, Lumiere, is likely going to side with Kurun, and when he does, Lambert is going to do the same. Raven expects to receive a summons letter pretty soon, so he asks Reitz to have the soldiers ready to move out at a moment's notice, and he also intends to prepare himself for the battle, but he can't even get himself out of bed right now due to his sickly condition. A while later, the summons letter indeed arrives and is asking Lambert to gather its forces for the upcoming war. Since Raven is still unable to participate, Reitz suggests that he and Charlotte could take the role of leaders and go in his place, but Ars is adamant that he must be the one to do it. Ars, Charlotte, and Reitz all stand at a cliff and look over the Canare district, where they are set to meet you Lord Lumiere, and Ars is a little worried about what kind of man he may turn out to be. They approach the castle gates and Ars introduces himself as the son of Raven Luvent, coming here in response to the summons from Lord Lumiere. The guard takes a look at the invitation, and it looks like it is genuine, but he doubts that Ars is here to represent House Luvent since he is just a child. But then the guard recognizes Charlotte as the famous Lady of Flames and Reitz as the Reaper of Luvent, which makes Ars wonder what kind of atrocities Reitz must have committed on the battlefield to earn himself such a title. In any case, the guard no longer has any doubts about Ars' identity, so he leads them inside the castle, where Ars is introduced to Lumiere's right-hand man, Menace Renard. Ars says it's a pleasure to meet him, and since Ars is the one who came, Menace assumes Raven must truly be ill and wishes for his full recovery. Ars takes a moment to scan Menace's stats, and his average is pretty high as he is literally good at everything. Menace mentions how he has heard of the achievements of his companions, and he immediately makes them an offer to come work here instead, but Charlotte and Reitz have both already sworn their loyalty to the House of Luvent, and while Menace is disappointed that they declined his offer, he can understand their commitment to Luvent. With introductions aside, he leads Ars to the meeting room where the other leaders are waiting, and Ars is a little nervous, but he enters the room and boldly introduces himself as Ars Luvent, representing Raven Luvent. He then takes his seat, but his nervousness hasn't died down one bit since no one has said a word yet. The first to break the silence is Kral Orslo, who used to visit Raven and play with Ars not to be so nervous, and even offers him some cookies. Meanwhile, the other guy is staring daggers at Ars, and he has no idea why. Just when he was about to try and smooth things over with him, the main doors swing open, and the headman of Canare walks in. Lumiere pyres. Lumiere thanks all of them for coming to meet him, and as he sits down, Ars scans his stats, and it's about what one could expect from the headman of a district. His prowess is really high, but nothing else is really remarkable. Although now that Ars looks a little closer, Means makes up for a lot of the skills that Lumiere lacks, so combined, they can make the best decisions for the country. Lumiere apologizes for calling them her on such short notice, but he wanted them to hear what he has to say in person. The assassination of the governor will no doubt lead to an all-out war, and in the struggle for succession, Lumiere intends to support the older brother to the end, and that won't change, so he asks if anyone here had any objections to his plans. Neither Kral nor Ars has anything to add to the meeting, so Lumiere brings the discussion to a close and tells them all of the rumors that Saltz may try to use this opportunity to launch another attack on them, so he wants all of their troops to be ready in case that happens. Now that the meeting is over, the others are already planning out ways to keep their troops prepared, and Ars is totally exhausted because he has never felt so nervous in his life before. While he is still lying there stretched out across the table, he gets called by Lord Lumiere, so he immediately stands up to apologize for his rude behavior. Lumiere tells him that there is no need to apologize and that he had heard about Raven's condition, so he's happy to have Ars here in his place. Luvent is a fairly small domain, but recently, the strength it has demonstrated among its people is far greater than what one would expect. He is also glad that Ars is mature enough to act as his father's proxy even though he's only 11, so he has very high hopes for the future of House Luvent. The same goes for Charlotte and Reitz as well. So having said all he wanted to say, Lumiere takes his leave to make his own preparations. As he leaves, Ars and the others realize they have a lot to live up to, so Ars suggests that they start preparing as best they can for the impending battle, but before he can do that, he gets called again, but this time by the guy that was glaring at him earlier. The man says this is the first time they've spoken to each other, so he introduces himself as Hammond Plyde. In other words, he's Licia's father. He asks if Hammond needs anything from him, so Hammond mentions that Licia has been distraught lately, and that the cause is Ars lacks communication. He asks if he has been responding to Licia's letters on time, and he tries to, but when he was writing the last letter he was wanting to send to Licia, his father's sickness got worse and the governor was assassinated, so Ars didn't have much time to finish his letter. He apologizes and promises to write a letter to her as soon as he is back home. Hammond admits that Licia is usually so reserved and self-obsessed, but recently she's begun to express her emotions more openly, and he believes that maybe because of Ars, so it is clear that she cares about him deeply. Licia has always been a bright and obedient girl, but he took her good behavior for granted and focused on military and state affairs instead of spending time with her, so he's sure she must have been very lonely. Especially since he knows there are a bunch of unsavory nobles around her, so he really wants her to find happiness, which is why he agreed to the betrothal. So he asks Ars to take good care of Licia, and Ars promises to do everything within his power to make her happy. Upon returning home, Ars tells Raven about everything Lumiere said at the meeting, and it is just as he had predicted, but he still has a few words for Ars about him going there without informing him. And those words are that he is proud of him. Afterwards, Ars gets around to writing a response letter to Licia and apologizes for not writing back sooner. He tells her of all the recent events and how he recently met her father, but with a war on the horizon, he has to do his best so he can win and protect Licia, just as he had promised Hammond. So later that day, we see Ars as he has begun training in the way of the sword under Reitz, but he gets knocked to the ground pretty hard. So Reitz suggests he takes a break since they've been going at it all day, but Ars says he wants to keep going. Everyone around him is growing stronger, and he has not improved at all over the past few years. Earlier, he led a troop in a mock battle, and to be frank, it was a total failure. He has read about war before, but he has no actual experience with it, and when he had real soldiers charging at him, he always flinched. He knows he will have Reitz and Charlotte there to support him, but if can't stand strong on his own while on the battlefield, he will just be a hindrance to everyone else. But in the middle of Ars's self-loathing, Rosal comes running up to him and says that Seitz has dispatched forces to Khmer, so Lumiere has requested that they head to the battlefield at once to intercept them. Khmer is Krall's territory, and while they have leeway in how they respond to Seitz's invasion, it will become Lamberg's problem soon enough if they don't deal with it now, as they will be Seitz's next target if they succeed in invading Khmer. Raven is still in no condition to fight right now, so that means that the Ars will head to go to the battlefield instead, and he is terrified of the idea. He tries to keep his composure and orders for the troops to be dispatched under his command, and as he leaves, Reitz tries to reassure him that everything will be okay because Ars has both Charlotte and Reitz on his side. A few minutes later, Ars addresses the troops and tells them all that he's going to be leading them into battle to protect the Khmer district, but in the middle of his speech, Raven interrupts and tells Ars that he cannot allow him to go to the battlefield just yet. He is still far too inexperienced, so Raven says he will lead the troops instead. Ars points out that Raven is still too sick to go to war, but even so, Raven would regret letting Ars die on the battlefield far more than letting himself die for the sake of the Khmer district. Ars tries to explain that with Reitz and Charlotte by his side, then he is sure to be able to return victorious, but victory isn't the issue here. Raven says Ars doesn't have the face of a warrior, and to prove it, he orders one of the soldiers to go bring the man they have locked up in the dungeon. And upon bringing him out, Ars asks who this guy is, so Raven explains that his name is Barrymord, and he has committed every crime under the sun, with no remorse whatsoever. He was meant to be executed a while ago, but Raven's illness had delayed things. He now wants to perform the execution right here, and he tells Ars to watch as it is done. If he is able to watch this man be killed while not losing his composure, then Raven will acknowledge him as a man and let him lead the troops into battle. Even as he is about to be killed, Barrymord continues talking about how much he enjoyed killing little kids like Ars the most. But even with him being a total scumbag, once the axe is brought down on his neck and his head is chopped off, Ars' eyes lose color because he can't cope with what he just witnessed. The sight of the severed head and blood sends Ars to his knees, but Raven tells him it is nothing to be ashamed of. This is how everyone is the first time they witness death, but right now, if one death phases Ars, and there's no way he'll be able to handle a battlefield where death constantly happens. Raven orders the troops to move out, along with Reitz, Charlotte, and Rosal, leaving Ars to think about how naive he had been to think he was ready for war. The war has begun, and Raven is valiantly leading the charge through the enemy forces alongside Reitz, while Rosal deals with the army formation. With the firepower they possess, victory is all but certain. However, Raven's condition isn't looking so good. After the battle had concluded, it was an incredible victory thanks to the Leuven forces, but Raven's health suffered greatly, so he was brought back to House Leuven on a stretcher 4 days after Ars' birthday. Things were already bad before, but now it's looking like Raven is on his last legs, and Ars comes over to ask how his condition is. He seems to have some minor injuries, so they are all concerned about him, but he says there is no need to worry since it's just from his training. Reitz explains that Raven fought admirably during the battle, but as soon the fight was over, all the strain he had put on his body had finally caught up with him, resulting in his current state. It was a long campaign, so this result was inevitable since Raven was near death in the first place, but Ars still blames himself for his father's poor health since if he had been stronger back then, Raven wouldn't have felt the need to go into battle in spite of his illness. The others try to cheer Ars up by saying he can't blame himself for this, and Ars appreciates their kind words, so he raises his head and asks to be updated if there are any new developments with Raven's health, because he is heading back out to continue his training. They all think it's weird for him to start training right now since it's already pretty late, but Ars wants to do it regardless, so they are left wondering if Ars is actually okay. The soldiers who stayed behind filled Charlotte in on what Ars has been doing while they were gone, and apparently he has done nothing but train himself through the mornings and nights, so she hopes he doesn't end up overworking himself. Just then, they hear a lot of banging on the door, and upon opening, they find that Licia has arrived unannounced. And while she is apologetic for her intrusion, she is really worried about Ars since they've been exchanging letters since the war started, but recently. While his letters haven't changed much, she can tell by the lack of emotion in them that Ars is growing distant and may be in the verge of starting his villain arc if nothing is done to help him. The retainers all look at each other, and then Reitz assures Licia that Ars' behavior is not her fault, but she didn't come here just to hear that. She is really worried about Ars, and that's exactly why she wants to know what happened to him. Reitz finally gives in and tells her all about the things Ars went through, from having to witness an execution, to being told he is too weak to go to war, and the guilt he feels over Raven's condition. Licia feels terrible for not being able to support Ars at all in his time of need, so she asks where she can find him. They tell her he is currently training, so she heads over to the training hall to meet him. However, as she opens the door, she realizes that Ars is pushing himself really hard to get better, and despite his training partner thinking it would be best to take a break for the day, Ars still persists since Raven was able to fight a whole war while being terminally ill, so he can handle this much. Licia decides not to approach right now and instead give him some space because that's what he really needs right now. Just then, a maid comes running over to tell everyone the good news that Raven has regained consciousness. But just as Rosal suggests that they tell Ars the good news to lift his mood, the maid reveals that Raven requested to speak with the three of them before he meets with Ars. They are puzzled by the request, but they all oblige and go to meet Raven in his room. Upon arrival, Raven thanks them for coming, and Charlotte wastes no time in pointing out that Raven looks like shit right now. Reitz scolds her for speaking so rudely about their lord, but Raven says it is alright since he isn't speaking to them as the Lord of Lamberg right now. He wants to know what they've thought of their lives here this far, and it goes without saying that this place is like heaven compared to the lives Reitz and Charlotte had before. And Rosal really enjoys being here as well, so Raven feels reassured. He tells them the reason he called them here, and it is to inform them that he is going to die soon. They don't want to believe it, but Raven knows his body better than anyone, and he can clearly tell that his body is running on fumes at this point, so he wants to have this conversation with them while he still can. When Ars first brought them here, he still didn't think much of them. Reitz is a Malkin, Charlotte is a woman, and Rosal was only 5 at the time, but they all shown him that his initial perceptions of them were wrong as they now stand as the pillars of House Leuven, so he's proud to have them as part of the family. As he won't be around much longer, he has a favor to ask of them, and it involves Ars. He knows Ars isn't strong enough to take to the battlefield yet, so thrusting the duties of a lord onto his shoulders is a cruel thing to do. Now that he is standing at death's doorstep, Raven realizes just how much stuff he has left undone. Now that he has the chance to think back on it, he realizes that he should have taken Ars to the battlefield to show him the realities of the world while he was still strong enough to protect him from it. But it's too late for regrets now, so he only asks that the 3 of them support Ars in his stead when he is gone. He's asking this not as their lord, but as Ars' father. He knows he can be far from objective sometimes, but he knows Ars is a good kid. He is loved by the people of the territory, and as he has proven with them. He has a talent for discovering other people's talents. He's proud to have a son like him, so he wants to make sure it will be there for him. Rosal is the first to speak up, and through his tears, he talks about how Ars helped him make use of his talent and come to an understanding with his family, so he owes him a lot. The same goes for Charlotte, since Ars gave her life meaning with the future he plans to create, and Reitz as well, since Ars lent a helping hand to him when he was all alone. Raven didn't even need to ask, because none of them could ever imagine serving anyone other than Ars, and after saying that, they all thanked Raven for taking them in. Reitz asks Raven for a favor, and then opens the door where Alicia had been standing. He tells her that Raven would like to speak to her, so she goes in and introduces herself to him for the first time. Raven apologizes for only being able to meet her in his current condition, but there's nothing he can do about it. He asks her if she still remembers the first time they met, but Alicia has no memory of ever speaking with Raven before this moment. He explains to her that he was the one who requested her betrothal to Ars after he saw her at a funeral. The first thing that came to mind when he saw her was how well-behaved and mature she acted, but beyond that, he could tell that she was a very kind person, so he wanted someone like her to be by Ars' side. He admits that his territory is rather small, but he wants her to stick Ars' side even if he may prove to be unreliable at times. Alicia cuts him off and corrects Raven, as while it may be true that Ars' kindness may make him vulnerable at times, he is working really hard to overcome that weakness. Hearing her speak so strongly about Ars, Raven realizes that Alicia has already fallen in love with Ars, so his mind is at ease knowing that she will never leave his side either. After he is done speaking with her, Alicia leaves Raven's room and tells the other that Raven now wishes to speak with Ars. The others understand and start leaving to call Ars, but before they do, Alicia calls out to Reitz and thanks him for giving her the chance to talk with Raven. Reitz says it was nothing, but as Alicia leaves and he is left alone, the realization that Raven will be gone soon starts hitting him really hard, as over the years he has spent here, he had come to think of Raven as an adoptive father. He had held his composure earlier, but he just can't bear the fact that he won't be with him anymore. A while later, Ars finally arrives to see Raven, and he is much more cheery after hearing his father has regained consciousness. Raven apologizes for calling him up at such a late hour, but Ars is happy to be here. He starts bringing up how he was doing research on possible ways to cure Raven's illness, but Raven knows none of it is going to work, so he cuts Ars off and starts telling the story of his life back when he was a young boy. He wasn't born in Lamberg, but rather from a small farming village in Missions. With the Lord, there was a tyrant who taxed the people relentlessly, so everyone was forced to live in poverty. Eventually, Raven was fed up with living like that, so he ran away to the city. By the time he arrived, the governor happened to be visiting, although he's still not sure what the exact reason for the visit was. But when he bore witness to the gallant aura of the governor riding in, he swore to himself that he would become a man just like him. From that moment forward, Raven studied the sword on his own so that he could become a knight, and when he finally became one, he fought with all his heart until he was eventually recognized for his accomplishments by Lord Lumiere, and before he knew it, he had been given his own domain. Time has really flown by, and he truly treasures all the people he has gotten to spend that time with. He knows Ars must feel at least partially guilty for his current state, but he wants Ars to know that he bears no responsibility for it whatsoever. This is the result of the way he chose to live his life, so he wants Ars to live his own life and take care of everyone in his stead. Ars doesn't like how Raven is talking, but he eventually comes to terms with the situation and agrees to handle things as best he can when he is gone. Raven can see that Ars is really ready to take on the responsibility, and he feels bad about burdening his son so much. But Ars tells him that he is glad to have a father like him. After the heart-to-heart they just had, Raven changes topics and begins asking Ars how things are going between him and Alicia, and from there they spend the rest of the night having a nice father-son bonding moment. But by the next morning, Raven was no longer with us. A burial is held for Raven where everyone in Ars' family, as well as all the townspeople, are gathered to say their goodbyes. So as Ars steps up to pay his respects, he addresses the people. He tells them that he got to speak with Raven for a long time before he passed on, and Raven entrusted the domain and the people within it to his care. He admits that he still isn't as strong as Raven was, but he promises to devote every ounce of strength he possesses to caring for and protecting everyone. So he asks for their support as he takes on the role of Lord. Everyone immediately rallies their support for Ars on his road to take over the duties of Raven, and Charlotte starts recalling all the good times she spent with the former Lord and how even on the battlefield, he would show concern for her overworking herself and told her so, save the desperate efforts for a time when Ars needs her. It was the same thing with Rosal. Raven told him there was no need to push himself too hard to study since he is still just a kid, and there would be plenty of time for him to grow up alongside Ars and be useful to him. Ars then asks that his father's spirit watch over him as he declares himself as the new Lord of Leuven. Meanwhile, in a bar, a woman overheard two guys talking about how the governor of Missions was assassinated by one of his sons during the succession dispute, and she seems really interested to hear more about the story. 3 months have passed since Raven's death, and Ars is still having trouble getting used to his new lordly duties, but he is managing thanks to the help of the people around him. He doesn't expect to be able to measure up to Raven's greatness, but he'll do his best to lead the people in his own way. A meeting is called between the lords, and before they get things started, they hold a moment of silence for their fallen comrade, Raven. Lumiere then announces that Ars will be taking up the mantle as the next Lord of Leuven, so Ars formally introduces himself and promises to uphold his duties to the best of his ability. Now that Ars has officially been inducted, Lumiere says he is on equal footing with the rest of them, so they expect great things from him. Moving on to the agenda of this meeting, Lumiere talks about the succession war between Kuren and Vasmark. Kuren, whom he had already decided to support, has successfully raised an army, so he will have Minas explains what's going to happen. The capital of the mission's province, Arkantes, is currently occupied by the younger brother, Vasmark, so he has soldiers in much larger supply than Kuren. However, Kuren still controls the trading city of Sempler, which gives them economic superiority. In terms of advantage, these two cities are pretty equal to one another, so the deciding factor in this war is going to be the loyalties of the surrounding districts. For this reason, Kuren is trying to secure the support of the neighboring districts, but the one to the west, Piraina, refuses to yield to the pressure. The district of Piraina may only have a small military, but the shortest way to get to Arkantes for an attack is through Piraina, so it is imperative that they get Piraina under their control if they want to run effective supply chains to the battlefront, which could possibly lead to them losing the war. Lumiere had hoped to bring them to his side without a need for pointless fighting, but since Piraina has been so stubborn in their refusal, it has forced his hand. They are left with no other choice but to subjugate Piraina. Ars isn't on board with this idea and speaks up, asking that they allow him to try his own measures first before they decide on subjugation. Lumiere is shocked to hear this, but he is also intrigued to hear what Ars has in mind. Several days earlier, Ars was going over the current state of things with Rosal, but none of it made any sense to him. Why would the Piraina dig their heels in and refuse Lumiere when they know they are putting themselves at risk of being attacked as a result? There has to be more to the situation than meets the eye. Rosal doesn't know what this mystery factor could be, but attacking before they find out what it is would be a stupid move, so he thinks it would be better if they try to figure out the full situation first. Ars thinks it would be a good idea as well, but he isn't sure how to go about gathering information on the matter. That's when Reitz suggests that they should hire a mercenary group known as Shadow. Rumors say that they are frighteningly good at getting the info they are after, so Ars asks if it is possible for Reitz to get in contact with them. He says he'll do his best to get in touch, but in the meantime, Rosal asks Ars to suggest that they handle the Piraina problem by themselves at the next meeting. With all Ars' points outlined, Lumiere agrees to give Ars some time to investigate the reason for Piraina's stubbornness, so Ars thanks him for being so understanding. As the meeting comes to an end, Ars is relieved that it all ended up working out without any issues, and as they are leaving, they run into the group of orphans Charlotte had been helping back in the day. They are all really happy to see her, and she's really happy to see them as well. She even brought them some smoked meat as a gift. Ars is then greeted by the lady who runs the orphanage. Since he trusts her, he had asked that she take in as many orphans as possible and give them a home. And it seems to have made a difference, since all the kids have been doing pretty well lately. They all have their aspirations now, and they are steadily working towards achieving them, and Charlotte is really proud of them for it. The kids thank Ars for helping them out so much, but he can't take the credit for all of this after all. Charlotte is the one who sends most of her salary here to help them. The kids had no idea about this, so now they are even more grateful to Charlotte than they were before. Eventually, they all say their goodbyes, and Charlotte smiles as she watches them leave. Initially, she had thought about taking them with her to Lambert when Ars first requested that she become his retainer. But while Lambert is certainly a wonderful place to live, Ars thought being in a big city like Canera would provide them with much better opportunities to learn and grow. They are still kids, so it is important that they get to see a lot of things and decide for themselves what they wish to become. Just then, Ars is surprised when he hears his name called out by Lisha. He asks how she got here, so Lisha explains that she was accompanying her father since he had to come here for the meeting, but then she heard that Ars was in town as well, so she came looking for him. Ars is delighted to see her, but he wasn't prepared to meet her today, so he's a little flustered. Lisha looks behind him and sees the orphanage full of kids having fun, and she thinks it is truly the most wonderful thing. But then a muddy kid runs over and hugs her, so Ars starts panicking and offers to buy her a new dress immediately. However, Lisha doesn't seem to mind and even starts taking off her shoes so she can join the kids in playing. Seeing this, Ars is reminded of just how amazing Lisha truly is, and he is falling in love with her all over again. A while later, as all the kids and Charlotte are asleep, the mature kids all sit together and have a discussion. Ars tells Lisha that he has asked Reitz to put him in contact with a mercenary group known as Shadow, and if all goes well, Ars will get to negotiate with them about a job he wants done. Charlotte is intrigued, so she would like to hear all about it, even asking if she can accompany him when he goes to meet them. Ars is against the idea since it could be dangerous, but she insists on joining him since Reitz will be there to keep both of them safe anyway. He can't argue with her logic, so he agrees to go get her if the mercenary group agrees to meet with him. However, Licia surprises him when she says she intends on sleeping here. Ars is stunned that would explain why Licia had so much luggage with her when they met earlier today. And it's not like she has any way of leaving when it is already so late into the night, so Ars caves in and says she can stay. He gets up to go get a room ready for Licia, but the surprises keep on coming when Licia tells him she would be happy to share his bed. Ars immediately rejects the idea, and the sound of someone flirting with Ars wakes Charlotte up, so by the time Reitz returns, he finds Ars being badgered by both of them. Rosal asks Reitz if all women are as pushy as those two, but he failed to realize that he was also in the danger zone, so he gets dragged off by Charlotte. He calls out for help, but Reitz simply watches as he gets taken away to sleep in bed with everyone. That night, neither Ars nor Rosal was able to get even a second of sleep, so by the next morning, they both looked completely drained. Reitz later comes in to tell Ars that he managed to get in touch with the Shadow mercenary group. With this new development, they all get dressed and head outside. Before they leave, Ars is approached by the kids from the orphanage who ask him to come visit them again soon. They also thank Charlotte for everything she has done for them. Unfortunately, they would probably have left the orphanage by the time she gets the chance to visit again, but they promise to do their best while she's gone. Charlotte can't wait to see what kind of people they all become, but until then it's goodbye. Ars can tell that Charlotte is in a really good mood from their visit, but then he realizes that he hasn't been informed where they will be going so that they can meet the members of Shadow. Reitz tells him that the meeting place is at a bar on the outskirts of town, so Ars is even more impressed that he was able to find them to begin with. Reitz had a little help from an old member of his mercenary group, but there still wasn't sure it would work, so he's glad it turned out all right. Mercenary groups sometimes hire other mercenary groups to do jobs, and that's because they all have their own specialties. For instance, the group Reitz was formerly a part of specialized in handling frontline battles, but Shadow works with more covert missions. Intel, espionage, and even assassinations on occasion, so Ars is starting to get a little scared of meeting them. There is still one thing that has been bothering Reitz about the whole situation, and it's the fact that Shadow's former leader stepped down and was replaced by a rather young person. Ars asks if Reitz is worried that the new leaders won't be as good as the former one, but it's quite the opposite. The new leader is terrifyingly good at their work. And what concerns him is the fact that the new leader only takes jobs which he finds interesting. And money is not enough to sway her decision, so there's no way of knowing what kind of job he'll find interesting. Ars realizes how much of a challenge that could be, but he can't afford to fail since Lumiere is relying on him. They eventually arrive at the mercenary hideout, and Ars is immediately greeted by two ladies there. They think Ars is cute, so they offer him some juice, but the buff waiter tells them that all the tables are taken, so Ars and his group are going to have to leave. Ars can't believe he is being turned away before he even gets to meet with the Shadow leader, but Reitz knows how to handle this. He tells the waiter a secret phrase, and after hearing it, he is suddenly okay with them staying and shows them to a table. Everyone in the room is staring at them, and Charlotte thinks they are being really rude, so she's considering going domestic terrorist on this joint. Reitz calms her down and suggests that they just order some food. He is curious to find out what the leader is like, and so is Ars, so he starts scanning the room with his ability. As the leader of a group like Shadow, they probably investigate their targets thoroughly, but also their clients, so the leader could be observing them in this room as they speak. Ars zones out for a second and doesn't realize that the waiter is here to take their order, but as he looks up to place his order, what he sees is frightening. He freezes up for a second, but he soon regains his composure and says he'll have a juice. The waitress confirms the order and walks away, but Ars is still frazzled, so he gets up to go use the restroom. After splashing some water on his face, he peeks at Reitz to make sure his appraisal skill is still functioning properly and nothing seems to be wrong with it, but he can't believe the stats he saw from the waitress. Prowess at 92 and ingenuity at 90, and all that is while he could as only a 22-year-old man. Just then, that same waitress grabs Ars at knife point and asks how he could possibly have figured out that he was the leader of Shadow. He wants answers, and he is prepared to kill him to find out. However, before Ars can get cut, Reitz shows up and saves Ars. The leader attempts to stab Reitz, but his skills are too sharp for that, and he is easily able to stop his arm. The leader is surprised that Ars was able to call over an ally on such short notice, even though Ars definitely didn't call Reitz here. Licia then enters the room and calmly threatens the leader for drawing a blade on Ars. The only way she will be willing to let this transgression slide is if the leader accepts their request unconditionally. The leader confidently smiles and asks her what she's going to do about it if he refuses. It'll be kind of harder for him to keep doing his job if his identity gets out, so it might be better for him to just kill Ars and make his escape. Ars doesn't like the sound of that, but Licia isn't worried since the leader wouldn't stand even a slight chance of pulling that off, at least not with Reitz here. In a fight with Reitz, the leader wouldn't probably struggle to escape with his life, let alone assassinate anyone, but he's smart enough to have realized that on his own. But even if he decides to take the gamble and refuse their request anyway, Licia assures him that there will be no hole on earth that he could use to escape her wrath. The leader finds this whole situation amusing, so he bursts out in laughter and apologizes for his rude actions. However, he still wants an answer from Ars because he needs to know how he could have been discovered when he thought his disguise was perfect. Ars reveals that he is able to view the abilities of others with his appraisal skill. That would certainly be a plausible explanation, but the leader finds it difficult to just take his word for it. So Ars asks if there is any way he can prove it to him. While saying this, Ars calls the leader by his name Mazak, which he saw from the status window, and this grabs his attention since no one by him knows his real name. He doesn't even use it anymore and calls himself Fam, but the fact that Ars knew that name is all the proof he needs for the legitimacy of his skill. He agrees to take Ars' job because he has taken a liking to him, but also because he would rather not die at the hands of Reitz today. Ars is happy that Fam is willing to help him, but he hasn't even discussed the details of the job yet, and he still doesn't know anything about Ars. Fam says he doesn't need to bother since he can already tell that Ars is a great person from the people he surrounds himself with. Reitz is not one to be messed with, and Licia looks like she has special forms of torture ready for anyone who hurts Ars, so he would rather stay on his good side. Fam walks out and says they can discuss the details of the job in the back room, and once they are alone, Reitz thanks Licia for what she did back there. When she saw the look on Ars's face, she knew the waitress had to be the leader of Shadow, so she discussed it with Reitz after he left, and they decided to follow him. Ars thanks them for saving his life, and later, they give Fam the details of the mission. If it's just to figure out why Piranha won't back down, then it should be fairly easy to do, and since this is the first time they'll be doing business, he'll even give them a discount and only collect 1 gold for payment. Ars asks how long it will take to get this done, and after thinking about it, Fam says it will take him about 5 days to complete, which is a lot sooner than Ars had expected, so with the details confirmed, he leaves the rest up to Fam. Now that the negotiations for the job have been summed, the three return to their table where Charlotte has been stuffing her face for a while now. She still has no idea what they were doing since they were gone for a long time, so Licia explains they had a run-in with the leader of Shadow. Ars nearly got killed, but they eventually managed to strike a deal with Fam. Charlotte is disappointed that they didn't tell her before they went and did all that since she would have liked to see Fam in person, and soon after. Fam comes to the table with a plate of pancakes, and Ars is left speechless because Fam's waitress act is utterly flawless, and it would have totally fooled Ars too if he hadn't seen his stats before. A few days later, Ars returns to the restaurant as Fam had asked, and upon arrival, he sees the place is completely empty. He asks Fam where all the other members of Shadow are, so Fam explains that they are off on a different investigation job since this kind of work requires a lot of manpower. That makes sense, so Ars asks how many people Fam had to take to fulfill his request, but for Ars' mission, Fam just did it on his own because he thought it would be interesting. Ars is surprised that Fam went in solo, but then again, with his stats, it wouldn't be too far of a stretch for him. His skills in this type of work are probably why he became the leader of Shadow despite having a mediocre leadership score. Without wasting any more time, Fam informs Ars that the investigation was a success as he managed to figure out why Piranha refuses to side with Curran, although he can't tell them how he got his information since it's a trade secret. While he was investigating, he got his hands on a piece of paper that is pretty important, and it explains everything. Ars takes a look and sees that the paper is actually a pact containing the signatures of all the people who have sided with Vasmark in the war. And among those signatories, there's one in particular that stands out, the signature of the Lord of the Massa District. Ars isn't familiar with the Massa District, so Reitz gives him a little geography lesson and explains that it is located over here in the west, and it is known for having one of the largest infantries on the continent, even rivaling that of the Arcantes army, so they would be a game changer to whichever faction they sided with. From what they know, Massa had chosen to side with them in assisting Curran, yet this document shows Massa pledging their support to Vasmark. If this pact is genuine, then it means that Mesa has betrayed them, but Ars can't understand why they would do such, and Fam couldn't get any information on Massa's reasons for betraying Curran. But from what they've learned, one thing is certain. If Lumiere continues with his plan to invade Piranha, then Massa may undermine the invasion by encircling Lumiere's forces. Or even worse, Massa may defeat Lumiere's army altogether. Losing Lumaire's army would tip the scales of this war wildly in favor of Vazmark. So Piranha has likely concluded that joining Lumaire and siding with Kuran is a losing prospect, which explains why they refuse to offer any assistance. Just to make sure, Reitz asks Fam if he can guarantee that the pact he showed them is truly genuine, as even if he says it's a trade secret, it couldn't have been easy to acquire such important documents. Fem states that he never reveals his methods to anyone, even if it is to his most trusted allies, but he can assure Reitz that this pact was found in Castle Piranha, within the room where the headman sleeps. Seeing that Fam is very serious about this, Reitz apologizes for doubting him and accepts that the pact must be real. Their business with Fam has now been concluded, and as a goodwill gesture, he allows Ars and Reitz to take the pact document with them. Ars is amazed by Fam's skill and efficiency in reconnaissance, so he regards him as a real ninja, but before he forgets, he starts reaching into his pocket to pay Fam for the remainder of the agreed-upon amount. However, Fam tells him to save it since he doesn't need Ars to pay anymore. Ars doesn't think it is fair to withhold payment from Fam since he was able to provide exactly what Ars had asked for. But Fam tells him to consider it a way of apologizing for nearly killing him when they first met and a kind gesture towards their future deals. Ars eventually agrees to keep the second half of the payment, but he'll pay Fam extra the next time they require his services. But in the meantime, he and Reitz need to go inform Lumaire of Masa's betrayal at once. Back at Castle Canaire, Lumaire is shocked to find out that Mesa intends to side with Vazmark instead, so he asks Ars if he is sure that this pact is genuine. Ars assures him his source said that the pact came from Castle Piranha, so Lumaire believes him. Although it still makes no sense since Lumaire knows that the head of Masa has always thought highly of Kuran, so why would he betray him now? With the current development, he now realizes that getting Piranha to join them will be no easy feat, so he asks Menace to take the pact to the other lords so they can start formulating a plan of action. He also commends Ars on a job well done since without his help, Lumaire may have gotten himself backed into a corner against Piranha. Ars doesn't want to take all the credit since he hired a mercenary leader to do most of the work, but as Menace was leaving with the pact, he stopped dead in his tracks and informs Lumaire that something is off about the pact. Everything else seems to be in order, but the seal of the Masa district isn't quite right. To prove his point, he leads everyone to take a look at a copy of Masa's seal which they have on file, and while the one on the pact looks almost indistinguishable, there are minor details amiss in the pact's version. In addition, the signature looks like the real thing as well, but is inconsistent with the handwriting of the Lord of Masa. The seal they gave on file was gotten directly from Masa, so if the two seals don't match, then the one on the pact must have been forged. The forgery must have been done to deceive Piranha into believing Masa had betrayed Lumaire, thus forcing them to side with Vazmark as the only other option. Lumaire tells the others that Menace has a discerning eye, so his word on the authenticity of the seal can be trusted. Ars didn't know Menace possessed such a skill, as his appraisal skill only shows him stats, so he makes a mental note to not assume that he knows everything a person can do just because he can see their stats. Back on topic, a forged seal would no doubt eventually be found out sooner or later, so Ars wonders why someone would go through all the trouble in the first place. Reitz suggests that it may have been done to buy time, and Rosil agrees with him. With Piranha resisting, Lumaire would have invaded them, and while Piranha would certainly fight back, it would ultimately fall to the superior forces Lumaire possesses. So all that matters would be that the opposing side would have control over Piranha in the meantime. And if they view Piranha as disposable, then their real goal must be the explosive Magistones that can be mined there. These Magistones are extremely valuable, and Piranha is one of the 4 locations where they are currently mineable. Their goal must be to gather as many of these stones as possible before Piranha falls, since when they are refined, they can be used to cast powerful spells and create even more powerful weapons. With this being the case, Rosil believes that attacking Piranha is no longer an option since Piranha would have been an ally under normal circumstances. Plus, fighting them would weaken the forces of Lumaire overall, which only serves to improve Vazmark's chances of winning. The only way to come out on top in this situation would be to reveal the truth to Piranha and win them back over, but how they'll do that isn't clear since Piranha has constantly been refusing all the messengers that have been sent there. Sometime later, we see Ars in Castle Piranha as he has managed to gain an audience with the headman. Piranha is going to ignore the fact that Ars admitted to stealing a copy of the pact that he had locked in his room, so he wants to hear what Ars has to say. Ars begins his statement by saying he and Lambert as a whole wish to join Piranha in supporting Vazmark instead. He claims that after finding out that Mesa is betraying Kuran, he realized that the war was going to be a losing battle, so he thinks it would be best to support the winning side. Ars also says Lumaire is on board with the idea as well, which sparks joy in Piranha's headman. He is glad he won't have to fight Lumiere any longer, so since his secret is apparently out, he promises to put a good word in for Ars and Lumiere so they can be accepted into Vastmark's faction. But before that, Ars wishes to confirm one thing. He asks Pirina if he is certain of the authenticity of that document, and Pirina wholeheartedly believes it to be real, even though the only confirmation he has is that it came from Vastmark himself. Since he is so confident that Masa has indeed betrayed Lumiere, Ars asks if he knows why Masa would suddenly betray Lumiere when they have always been loyal to him. Pirina hadn't given it much thought, but he chalks it up to Masa acting in their own selfish interest. Still, Ars isn't so convinced that Masa would be willing to take on the risk of getting surrounded by Lumiere's forces if they side with Vastmark, so he wants to know if Pirina has thought of what Masa's reasons could be. Ars has been making good points thus far, but all this constructive criticism makes Pirina realize that Ars never had any intentions of joining Vastmark in the first place, so he orders his guards to arrest Ars at once. Fortunately, Ars can with Reitz, so Reitz holds off the guards while Ars de-escalates the situation and tells the headman of Pirina that he has some important news to share with him. He then gives the go-ahead for the second person behind him to reveal their identity, and to Pirina's shock, it is the headman of Masa. Back when Ars and the others were still thinking of a plan to get Pirina to realize the deception, Rosal suggested that they provide proof that the seal on that pact has been forged. To do this, they went straight to the headman of Masa to inform him of the situation. He is outraged that someone would dare to forge his signature and seal. Ars explains that it was part of a plot by Vastmark to deceive Pirina into betraying Curran's faction, so they plan to get an audience with Pirina by pretending they wish to switch over to Vastmark's side as well, at which point Ars wants to show Pirina a letter from Masa stating that the pact is forged. Masa is on board with the plan, but he is still angry that Vastmark would use such underhanded tactics, so he intends to visit Pirina in person to reveal the truth. That brings us back to the present where Masa directly tells Pirina that he did not sign a pact with Vastmark, nor would he ever do so because he is loyal to Curran. And with the new information he has been given, Masa asks Pirina if he still wishes to side with Vastmark. Pirina resigns himself and admits that he wishes to side with Curran again, but he also betrayed him, even if it was due to deception, so he doubts Curran would be willing to take him back. Indeed, betrayal is a difficult thing to forgive, but Masa knows Pirina only did it because he wanted to ensure the safety of his people by winning the war at all costs. But be that as it may, Pirina should have investigated the matter before making any rash decisions, so Masa cannot ignore how easily he was fooled. Pirina is ready to accept any decision Masa makes, but since it was Ars who discovered the forgery in the first place, he leaves the decision of Pirina's fate up to Ars. Ars is caught off guard, but after composing himself, he agrees that Pirina has acted foolishly and could have caused grave harm to Curran's faction, but everyone makes mistakes, and while it may be naive of him to be so forgiving, he is just glad that they managed to resolve all this without any bloodshed. So he is more than happy to have Pirina return to being an ally. Pirina is grateful to Ars for his kindness, and Masa approves of Ars' decision as well, so there's nothing more to discuss. As he is leaving, he asks Ars to inform Lumiere of the new developments, and Ars thanks him for coming along to help clear up the misunderstanding. On the contrary, Masa believes he should be the one thanking Ars since he was able to see through the enemy's plot and ultimately resolve the whole matter without conflict. So he has high hopes for the great things Ars will be able to accomplish. After everything was settled, Ars returns home where he visits Raven's grave. He talks about everything that happened recently and how it concluded with Pirina pledging their loyalty to Lumiere once more. Unfortunately, by the time Ars was able to make Pirina realize Vastmark's deception, he had already been able to acquire a large number of explosive magistones from the mines of the Pirina district. Just then, Ars is approached by Reitz and Rosal, who've been looking for him all over. They ask Ars if he is alright, and he says he's fine, but he has a lot on his mind. Both Masa and Pirina were desperate to protect their people, and Ars respects them for their strength as lords. But if Ars didn't have people like Reitz or Rosal by his side, then he would have been powerless to influence the situation in any way. However, Reitz reminds Ars that he will always be by Ars' side along with the others, so all he needs to worry about is doing what he feels is the right thing. Just then, Ars hears a maid running over to inform him that a carriage has arrived, and to his surprise, it is Lumiere who came to see him. Lumiere wanted to visit the grave of his longtime friend and associate at least once, so he pays his respects to Raven's grave. But he also had another reason for coming and informs Ars that Curran wants to meet him. This is a total shock to Ars since in terms of hierarchy, this is like a homeowners association community leader getting to meet the president, so Ars doesn't think he is worthy of such an honor. However, after Lumiere informed Curran of Ars' recent achievement, he grew interested in Ars and personally asked to see him, so Ars accepts and says he'll mentally prepare himself for the day he meets him. Unfortunately, that day is today, as Lumiere came here intending on taking Ars to see Curran immediately. Ars starts panicking because he's not ready for this at all, but with the support of Reitz and Rosal, Ars agrees to accompany Lumiere to see Curran immediately. Meanwhile, back in the manor, Charlotte was busy picking out her outfit for a party Ars had planned, when a maid had to come and deliver the bad news that everyone has already left to meet Curran without her. On the carriage ride to meet Curran, Rosal asks Reitz if it was really okay for them to leave Charlotte behind like they just did, but he justifies it by saying they need someone to defend Lamberg while they are gone. And besides, Charlotte is bound to forgive them if they bring a present back for her. Right now, Reitz is more worried about Ars, who has been quaking non-stop since they set out. Ars says he's fine, but he just wasn't expecting to meet Curran on such short notice. The man could possibly become the next governor of missions, so it's baffling to Ars why he would want to meet a small-town lord like him. Just so that he can be informed, Ars asks Rosal what the occasion is for the party he has been invited to, so Rosal explains that Curran summoned tons of influential nobles from all over the land, which means he is probably trying to raise morale among his supporters by meeting them in person. Hearing that there are going to be a lot of important nobles in addition to Curran, Ars starts feeling worse about this whole thing, but it's too late to back out now as they already arrived. Ars and the others look out the window and are amazed by how beautiful the trading city looks, making Ars realize that he needs to put in a lot of work if he plans to turn Lamberg into a place as beautiful as this. Reitz suggests that today's banquet might be the perfect opportunity for Ars to establish a good reputation among the elites, and Ars agrees to do his best toward that end goal. As they reach Semper Castle, all the guests begin filling the halls, but Ars notices that all eyes seem to be on him for some reason. None of them recognize Ars, so they think it's a bit out of place for a kid to be here on his own, and Ars is getting self-conscious about it. He soon spots a familiar face though and sees Lumiere across the hall while he's being treated by the other nobles. Lumiere notices Ars and tells him to join them since he's a lord as well, so Ars comes over and Lumiere introduces him to the other lords as the new lord of Lamberg. A moment later, trumpets sound to announce the arrival of Curran, so everyone bows their heads in anticipation of his arrival. Curran enters the room and tells them that they can raise their heads, and after finally getting to meet the man himself, the first thing Ars does is take a look at his stats. As expected, he possesses amazing stats befitting a leader, so Ars can understand why Lumiere and the others chose to follow him. But if Curran is already this amazing, Ars wonders what Vasmark must be like, since the rumors always said he was even more amazing than Curran. Curran addresses everyone at the party and thanks them all for making an effort to show up. He called them here to inform them that this Duchy Trade City is currently facing a fire situation as a result of Curran's father's passing. That is the fact that Vasmark has chosen to wage war on Curran for the right to succeed their father, even though Curran is the rightful heir. Unfortunately, the Summerfort Empire missed the part where that's their problem, so they're staying out of the dispute. Over the history of the Empire, it has succumbed to corruption, so Curran believes that the only way to fix it is through destruction and rebirth. So he vows to win this war and unify all the regions of Mission, turning it into the new nation of Mission. This means he wants to make Mission its own independent nation. But he knows better than anyone that doing that is not going to be an easy feat. However, with the support of everyone here, Curran is sure that they can accomplish anything because he thinks of them as the brightest and best people he could ask to stand by his side. And there is one person in particular, whom he wishes to appreciate for their accomplishments. He calls Ars up to the front so that everyone can see him, and Ars is frozen in shock, but with a little nudge from Rosal and Reitz, he eventually makes his way to the front and introduces himself. Curran then addresses the crowd and tells them all that Vasmark shamelessly forged documents to trick Pirina into siding with him, but Ars was able to see through the plot and help win Pirina back over to their side without any needless fighting. The other nobles can't believe that a child like Ars was able to achieve so much, but Curran tells them age doesn't matter. What matters is the results you are able to deliver. And right now, Ars has more accomplishments than anyone else in this room, so he asks for a round of applause for Ars. Ars graciously accepts the praise, and a while later, after he has spent some time meeting all the other lords, Ars is completely wiped out. He goes to the balcony to get some much-needed fresh air, but while he's out there, he bumps into Curran. Curran wanted to get a chance to talk to Ars in private, and he brings up what he has heard about Ars gathering very capable vassals. It's not often that he hears Lumiere speak so highly of someone. It would seem that Ars is not only quite smart, but also possesses a good eye for talented people. So if he wants to ask Ars an honest question, he just got to meet everyone that serves under Curran. So Curran wants to know what he thinks of them. Ars in appraised them when he first met everyone, but if he's being honest, all their abilities are pretty mid. But he doesn't know if he can just tell Curran that. Curran asks for an honest answer though, so Ars tells him that he didn't see anyone that was particularly amazing out there, so Curran asks Ars if he believes his own vassals are better than Curran's, and Ars respectfully tells him that the people he has have more talent than all of Curran's people combined. Ars thought Curran might get mad, but he actually appreciates Ars' honest opinion and says he knows that even though his vassals are definitely good and focused people, they aren't exactly top of the line. It just makes him realize that it is going to be incredibly difficult to win the war with the resources he has on hand right now. There are a lot of smart and talented people over on Vastmark's side, so while Curran may have more military power and money than they do, that won't mean much if the ones leading the war efforts are incompetent. That's why he was extremely relieved to hear the work Ars did, because it makes him glad to see that there's new talent on the rise. He has high hopes for Ars and even tells him that if he proves himself in battle, he will be rewarded with a promotion to the new Lord of Knair. Ars can't believe what he is hearing and asks what would happen to Lumiere if Curran makes Ars the new Lord of Knair. But Curran always planned on giving Lumiere a much bigger plot of land, since he is one of the few vassals that Curran can rely on. Also, before Curran leaves, he asks Ars if he would be willing to hand over his vassals, but of course Ars isn't going to do that, so he flat out rejects the idea. Curran already knew that Ars wouldn't agree to a brazen request like that, but he still does want the input of Ars and his vassals, so he wants Ars to join him in his war council. He also wants Ars to find some talented people for him so that he won't have to rely solely on the mediocre skills of the majority of his vassals. That was all he had to say, so Curran leaves Ars, who plans on living up to the expectations that Curran has for him. Meanwhile, over in Castle Arcantes, Vastmark is informed that his deception has been discovered, so Perina has cut ties with him. He's a bit disappointed that Perina didn't end up fighting Lumiere, but it's not a huge deal since his vassals tell him that they already gathered a large number of explosive Magistones from Perina, so even if the war were to start immediately, Curran wouldn't stand a chance. He doesn't have any talented vassals by his side, and on top of that, there are no talented soldiers besides Curran, while Vastmark's army is full of skilled and powerful men. They believe the chances of Vastmark losing are very slim. However, extremely slim isn't good enough for Vastmark. He only fights battles that he knows he will win for sure, so he needs them to make sure that there is no chance that they will lose. By the way, he asks one of his vassals if they know where the woman named Morel is, but he has no idea, and frankly, he thinks it would be a bad idea to hire her, since while she may be a talented woman, she is nothing more than an alcoholic now. So Vastmark agrees not to go looking for her, but he hopes that no one else goes after her either. Ars returns to Lambert with the others a few days later, and they inform Charlotte of everything that happened, including the fact that Curran wants them to join the next War Council meeting. Curran also wants Ars to help him find some more talented people, but the original way Ars used to find people won't exactly work now, since he doesn't have time to go searching by himself, so Reitz suggests that they entrust the job to Pham. Ars thinks it is a great idea, so they set up a meeting and Pham agrees to do it. But he tells Ars he doesn't want to be held accountable if he ends up finding someone that is incompetent, since he doesn't have an appraisal skill like he does. Ars says there will be no consequences if Pham fails, but if he ends up finding someone that is truly worthwhile, then Ars will give him a bonus of 20 gold coins. Pham promises to give it his best shot, so Ars and Reitz leave the bar and return to the others. However, along the way, Ars gets bumped into by a drunk woman, so he ends up falling over. The woman helps him back up and apologizes, so Ars tells her he's fine and she stumbles away. She ends up stumbling into Pham's bar while he's still setting up, and she immediately starts asking for a job here. One of Pham's people comes out of the back and recognizes the woman as Morel, and he clearly isn't happy to see her here. Pham asks how he knows Morel, so the guy explains that they used to drink together in rural bars a while back. Morel doesn't really remember him, but since he says he knows her, she asks him to help her out with the job since she's flat broke and doesn't have anywhere to stay. The guy refuses because she still owes him a ton of money from when they last saw each other, but Pham steps in, and under his waitress persona, he says he will be happy to have her work here. The guy asks Pham what he is thinking by hiring her since she is clearly a drunkard, but Pham thinks she may be an interesting person, so he'll handle it. As expected, Myrael is terrible at the job, but Pham lets it slide since he didn't hire her for her waitress skills. Once they close for the day, he sits down with Myrael and asks her what she has done with her life up till now. So she explains that she is a wanderer, so she goes from one place to another, drinking good alcohol along the way. Pham then asks what she used to do before she became a wanderer, but Myrael tells Pham that it's rude for a man to ask about a woman's past. Pham doesn't understand how she could figure out that he is in a disguise, so asks why she thinks he is a man, and Myrael explains that he just looks like a man to her. Although she doesn't mind that he enjoys cross-dressing and he is pretty cute, she'll tell them a little about her story. She and her stupid brother both used to work for an old man, but she's heard rumors that the old man is dead now, so she's quite sad about it. Fam asks what the old man was like, so Muriel begins talking about how he could be a bit scatterbrained at times, but he was a really interesting person nonetheless. He believed in her and her brother even though they were poor, and his name was Amador Salamakia. That's the name of the former Duke of Missions, the father of Kuran and Vasmark. So the guy thinks she must be lying, but Fam keeps listening and believes that she isn't lying. He tells her he has a better job for her. That same day, Fam sends a letter to Ars, telling him that he has found a talented person for him, and Ars is surprised by how quickly Fam was able to complete the job, and he already sent the woman over, so everyone heads to the front door to meet her. Reitz opens the door and Fam greets them, saying he has brought the woman, so he introduces Muriel to Ars. Ars recognizes her as the one who bumped into him earlier, but Muriel has already forgotten all about him. She was intrigued when Fam told her about the job here, so she asks if Ars is willing to hire her, and after taking a look at her stats, Ars is terrified by what he sees because she's an absolute genius. This was the end of episode 10. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.